Hello once again, it's Mr. Pete, your octogenarian YouTube shop teacher, and this is episode number 34B of my What Makes It Work series. So it's part 2 of a two-part video, and it's entitled How a Push-Button Magnetic Indicator Base Works. And in part 1 I had this all apart and I showed you how the magnet worked and I cleaned up the inside of it, and in fact it works so well now that I decided to restore it in full rather than throw it away, because originally, and in the first part, you may have thought that I was treating this kind of roughly, and I was, because it was just a one-time deal where take it apart, show you how it works, and pitch it in the trash. But it's a pretty nice unit. And then I found out that the magnetic push-button starrett is about a $200 item. I don't believe this is starrett. I really don't know. But let's continue where I left off in part 1. Stick with me now. I'm making this video in August of 2023, and I recently finished this little project device, and that's a two-part video. There's the prototype of it, so watch that when it's available. It may already be available depending on when you watch this, so I hope you watch it and enjoy that. Back to this now. Here's what I need to do. First of all, I'm going to take it apart again, although it's all done on the inside, because I want to clean this up real well, probably just with a file and with emery cloth, and then I'm going to mask it off and paint it black where it was black before, but I'll have the chrome plated push button out of there. And then I am going to make a new post, because as I told you before, this one is bent. Can you see that? So it's probably bent right down there, plus mouse urine has taken its corrosive advantage with this, so it's pretty well ruined. So I have a brand new piece of drill rod here that I bought for a job from Enco 15 years ago and never did use, and so that's accurately sized, but already it's picking up just a little bit of rust, so I got to clean that up. And then I have to, on the south bend lathe, turn it down, and I will thread this 5/16 fine with a die. And one other thing I want to point out here is that this has a screwdriver slot in there in order to install it and tighten it. I do not like that, and it's a lot harder to make than what starrett did by putting a cross hole in there, and then you can stick a scriber or a little screwdriver or whatever in there and twist it out should you want to. And that's the way I'm going to do it. However, this is a different size than what was on this one. This is 1/2 inch. This is smaller. I think it's 3/8, but that's irrelevant anyway. So that's what I'm going to do with that. And then after painting it, I need to make a new little cover plate here, because I mutilated this. It was riveted on. There was no good way to get it off, and there was no graphics on this. That's why I do not know who made it. Just disappeared over time. I hope you watched part 1, but if you did not, this plate here comes out with the spanner. It is threaded, not a press fit. That was really hard for me to figure out in part 1. So this will screw out. The other end screws out too, but there's no need for me to remove it. Also, the pinholes are on the inside rather than the outside. So out this comes. And I tried to explain in the other video how this actually works. In other words, the on and off of the magnetic force or field. So go back and look at that if you want an explanation. And there it is. And it's real hard to pull out because of the magnet, not corrosion, because I have cleaned this, so that part is all done already. And I believe this is cast iron rather than steel, because cast iron is a good material for magnetism and magnetic items. There's nothing more that I'm going to do with this piece, but I'm setting it aside so it will not pick up any grinding dust or anything. It's just It's so strong and it's hard to get that off of the magnet. So what I'll do with this, and a lot of this is going to be off camera. See the little brass plate in here? But I'm going to take off most of the paint and clean up all the surfaces, and probably just with emery cloth and a file. But I'll take it out to the wire wheel and clean that up a little bit first. And I'm not going to show any of that because it's routine. Then I will mask it and spray paint it satin black. I'd like to have some black crinkle finish, but I do not have any, and I'm not going to pay $9 for a penny's worth of paint for a small project. You know how cheap I am. I spent about 15 minutes with the wire brush and a file cleaning this up, and there were a bunch of dings on here and high spots. I suppose it had been dropped many times over the years, but now making its debut here is my bell saw, and I've shown this in other videos, but I don't think I ever actually used it in a project. But this is a bell saw lapping machine, but I have an abrasive on here. It's probably a little fine for what I'm doing, but the whole idea here is this is a stop, is all it is. But it beats the heck out of a handwork, doesn't it? Oh, that's doing a pretty nice job, if I dare say so. So I'll do the rest without boring you here. And this little piece too, it'll be hidden, so it's no biggie. This is a, yeah, I said that's a stop. If I owned a surface grinder, I probably would have surface ground this, but that's as far as I'm going to take it. So what I'll do next is clean it real well with a brake cleaner. Then I'm going to mask it and get it ready for, well, that is getting it ready for painting, isn't it? Alright, it's masked and it's cleaned and it's ready to spray. And the reason I have a bolt in here, first of all, so I don't get paint in the hole, but secondly, I got a handle so I can rotate it around. So I won't show it, but I'm going to paint it, as I said, satin black. And while that is drying, and it might even be overnight, I will start to work on the rod or the post. I've cut that 1/2-inch drill rod to length, as you can see. Now we have a little lathe job here. I have to turn a step on there, as you see right here, and that's 5/16 diameter, and it's a 5/16 fine thread, only a 1/4 inch long. That's why it bent. And then there is an undercut there. Can you see that? And the purpose of the undercut, of course, is so you can screw it all the way into the shoulder, because the thread is always tapered at the end. So we'll go out to the South Bend lathe and I'll turn it down with this and use a cutoff tool to make that little undercut there, and then thread it on the lathe by hand with a die, but that will assure that the thread is straight. I'm out in Studio G, and this is the little South Bend 9-inch lathe donated to me from Florida by John Collings. And I'll just turn that step on this, but boy, I turned the lathe on, and that chuck just runs incredibly out of true. Just a lot of run out, but actually it isn't going to matter one bit, even if it was 1/8 of an inch off. So I'm going to forge ahead. So I need to turn it down to 312 thousandths. Actually, I like to go a little bit under so it's easier to thread. And now, using the cutoff tool, I will make that undercut that I've been talking about. Let me slow that down. And now I'm ready to thread, and this is a hand operation, not under power, By the way, I put a healthy chamfer on there to help the die get started. And what is the depth of the undercut? I forgot how many thousandths, but it should be the minor diameter of the thread, or the root diameter of the thread. So we're not cutting any thread there at all. Now I have threaded all the way up to the shoulder until it more or less stopped on me. Now remember, that's a tapered die, so what I will do now off camera is to reverse the die in the holder and run it up, and then I'll have a full depth thread clear to the shoulder. Well, I'm making progress. The paint is almost dry. I haven't taken the masking off yet. Now I did have to run a 5/16 24 bottoming tap because there was some Loctite in there that had hardened up. So the column fits nicely now, and I faced this in, put a little chamfer on it, and as I told you earlier here, I have no intention of putting a slot in there for tightening it. I am going to put that cross hole in there, and that's an 1/8 inch hole on the starrett. So I'm just about ready to do that, but let me show you how I'm going to do it, because you can spoil the entire piece of work by drilling it off center. I just love to use drill jigs or drill bushings to center it. Let me show you that. Like the starrett, this hole will be on the blue mark. That's a 1/2 inch up from the shoulder. Now this is what I used at school. I had a lot of these in different sizes. This happens to be the 1/2 inch size, which is what I need. And the thing is, I don't have the right size bushing. This is a 1/4. So what I'm going to do is put the work in there, and I will line that up like a bullseye. I'll use a little flashlight, line it up, tighten this down to hold it in place, and then I will peck it with a 1/4 inch drill, and that will make the little mark on there that will allow the 1/8 inch to go in there, even though it's way too big of a hole. But that will hold it on center for me. Keep it from deflecting one side or the other. Okay, mission accomplished. And you see, the hole is perfect. Now, there'll be a little bit of a burr on the backside, not much, but these were absolutely invaluable in teaching. So I had a whole series of them in different colors. I'd say, use the red jig. Of course, nothing else would fit in there, but I had the appropriate size bushings. These are removable, it's that twist type. You know that. Oh, I wanted to mention also, I think, this is drill rod, so it's water hardening tool steel, and it's very accurate in size because drill rod is ground to the perfect size. So this will be 500 thousandths. Let me demonstrate. You see, it's 500 thousandths. Now, if you make just a regular piece of cold rolled steel, it may be a little bit off. For instance, this piece is 498. That's just regular cold drawn steel. So again, the purpose of that little hole, probably told you this 5 times, you're getting sick of hearing it, is to run it up to the shoulder. Now, the very last thing I will do, and I'll never mention it again, is put a little Loctite on there, because I see somebody else did that. But if you put a punch or something in there, that just allows you to tighten her down to the shoulder. That's the purpose. 45 years ago, my friend Paul Miller worked for Nickeloid in Peru, Illinois, and my other friend Gary, the man that has the clock shop in his basement, there's been videos on that. They both worked there, well, together for that matter, as chemists. But what American Nickeloid did, and they were owned by the Mesas in Peru, a neighbor of mine, they would take metal, it could be aluminum or stainless or brass or copper, whatever the customer wanted, and they would surface finish. In this case, it's anodized aluminum. So I've got other samples here. There's masking on most of them. So this is a piece of aluminum that's brass colored and black and so on. And then I got a whole stack of these about that thick that I had at school. That's why Paul gave them to me to show to the kids. All different kinds of steel. Some of them had the wrinkle finish on them, and coils of this steel was then sold to customers that might have been making I don't know what kind of products, but for instance, a fireplace set. You know, the grill that's gold color and all that. That was one of the big customers. But anyway, the reason I'm going through this little rant here, is it a rant? Nah, discussion. I thought I had red, but I must have used it. But I keep saving this. Oh, I don't want to waste this. I have saved it for 45 years. What am I thinking? So, what am I going to use it for? Remember, this was the original little piece that went on here, and I think this was held on, well, it was held on by the rivets, but what I'm going to do is either use glue or double back tape or something like that. I'm going to avoid the little holes in the rivets, so I have to shear a piece of this to the appropriate size and punch a hole or drill a hole right in the middle for the button and then fasten it on there. I think the blue will look good, but I would have preferred red. Again, this is anodized. See, there's masking on that, so taking my marker here. For small jobs like this, I like to use this little shear. Actually, I believe it's made for floor tile. And I keep it, I don't use it very often, so I keep it under the stairs. And look, my wife doesn't dust under there. I'm really mad at her. I'm going to have to fine her or ground her or something. Well, there it is. So I found the center. I'll center punch it, drill a little pilot hole, then I use a step drill. And I've already tried that on sample pieces to see how it'll work. I have a big Whitney Jensen punch, and I got every punch size known to mankind except a 7/16 is what I need. So now that I know this will work pretty well, I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, I'm ready for assembly. You know, this reminds me of a wheel cylinder for a car brake, doesn't it? Boy, is that magnet strong. So I've got it, all the dust off of it. It attracts the most minute dust. So I'll go ahead and pull this masking off, which is kind of tedious. And let's see what it looks like. All right, the masking's off. Looks pretty good. I mean, it's still rough. There's a lot of dings in there. But let's put the magnet in. Like wow. And then, remember, this is threaded. I didn't clean this up because it'll be covered up by the escutcheon plate. I'm going to call that an escutcheon plate. I'll get that screwed in place and snug down with my pin spanner. And it moves freely. All right, I wonder how it's going to look. Drum roll, if you please. All right, and it's going to look something like that. Actually, it'll look exactly like that. No ornamentation, no writing. If I had a laser printer or something, I would do that. And I guess what I'm going to do is just a dab of 5-minute epoxy on each corner and put it back in. That looks nice, doesn't it? And then, of course, this, and I'm done. Well, I hope this works. It's older than Methuselah. It says 5, just 5 quick cure, whatever that means. On it goes. The doggone glue is all over the place. Well, there it is. Done. And got the little glue around there. That's not the best. Moves freely. You know, I was looking at all my other indicator posts, and they're just about every different size that you can think of. So I made this 1/2 inch. I don't know really what that fits. I was just copying the original, but the post could be made to any size you want. And does it work? Heck yes. Looks a little plain with the blue, but the job is done. And I was going to throw this away originally, and probably a useful tool yet for somebody. Throw that away, all the scraps, and clean up around here. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.